Then with that, I have all of our members here. Or at least I think we have all of our members here. If I've missed anybody, please speak up. For staff, we have myself, Jeff White, Julie Simpson, Alex Johnson, and Mike Rinaldi and Marissa Powell. I believe we've got a few other staff members on as well. But with that, Maya, can you change us over to the beginning of the coordinating council presentation? Thank you so much. And if you could go one slide forward. Perfect. I just wanted to, before I turn things over to our chair, John, I wanted to at least put a couple of notes out. Renee Zobel from New Hampshire is our new member. Last meeting we had her on as a proxy. So welcome, Renee, as the New Hampshire member. And Hannah has joined us as proxy as well. And so welcome, Hannah. The other point I wanted to make here on ACCSP staff, Mike Rinaldi has been a data team member and data coordinator for several years now, but just in the last few weeks, he applied for and was selected as the new data team lead. So congratulations to Mike Rinaldi as our new data team lead. And in a side bend, congratulations to Julie Simpson for now holding one title as deputy director instead of trying to maintain two job roles and titles as she has for the last few years. So congrats to Mike and a thank you to Julie. And with that, John, I'm going to ask, so Maya, one more slide, please, and I will turn it over to John to get us going.
All right. I appreciate that and getting us started. So welcome everybody, and I'll call this meeting of the ACCSP Coordinating Council to order for yet another webinar effort on all of our behalf. So thanks everyone for being there and your patience as we get through the webinar world continuing. So the first order of business is consent for approval of the agenda. So are there any requested changes or additions to the agenda? So any hands, Jeff? I don't see any.
I do not see any either.
All right. Oh, I guess I'm just a participant. I wouldn't see any anyway. Okay, so let's consider the agenda approved. Our last meeting was May 2021. So are there any changes or additions to the minutes? Hearing nothing then, Jeff, minutes stand approved.
Excellent. Thank you, John.
And then I guess the next thing is to open it up for public comment. So Jeff, seeing no comments?
Correct, no comments.
Okay, and so Jeff, on my hard agenda I have, do we need to consent approval for the program update?
No.
Okay, good enough then. So I turn it over to you then to go over the presentation on funding projections and 2022 proposals.
All righty, thank you so much. Maya, next slide, please. So I appreciate everybody here. Just kind of a new bit of the process. Historically, during the August meeting, the Coordinating Council has not done a lot with the current proposals, but as we move to a little bit more transparency of where things are at and follow up with some of the extensions and where the funding looks to be for next year, I wanted to provide some more information to everybody about what proposals were received, where we are in the process, and also provide some information that I've been working with the leadership team about. So the next slide does have a summary of all the proposals, but we did end up with 8 maintenance proposals. During the May meeting and the funding process, there was an allowance for maintenance proposals to request a 6th-year extension, and that could have applied to, I believe, 6 proposals, but 3 partners chose to select that option and submitted some proposals. So we did end up with 4 new proposals, and the ACCS administrative grant does include a new software team member proposal. Last year that was proposed and selected to delay. And then, of course, where we are in the process at the moment, the initial proposals were reviewed. There was a ability for staff workload to be discussed. Again, a new part of the process. There were 3 projects that have a significant impact on staff time total. So these estimates are a little bit broad, but across 3 projects, there's the potential for kind of 800 ACCSP staff person hours that was estimated. And I'll touch on those a little bit more on the next slide. So Maya, go ahead, please. So this is a summary of the proposals that have been submitted. I realize that it's a little bit small, but the benefit of us all having computers in front of us instead of projections, hopefully you can all see this, of what the 3 extension year projects are, as well as the proposals that came in as maintenance and new. The 3 projects that had some staff workload items, that a couple were in the 200 to 400 hour. The South Atlantic Council North Carolina Citizen Science Project is one of those that is expected because there's a bit more of an ACCSP role in coordination and development of the central process there. Another is PRFC trip reporting as a new partner in implementing trip reporting and using SAFES. That is typical and expected to have a higher staff workload. And then the third is the VMS and eTrip integration, and that is under new projects, item 1, the Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and that has to do with new location tracking requests and requirements, which trackers or which devices that will be installed on vessels interact with SAFES, and the ability for SAFES to present kind of the consolidated tracks back to the agency partners that would have the right confidential allowance to see kind of the viewpoints across vessels. I know that relates to the previous workshop on wind energy, as well as lobster fishing locations and those types of activities. So the VMS integration has a lot to do with the spatial work that Mike Rinaldi has been doing and will continue to be doing, and how to summarize that. And the overall funding here is a little bit above what we expect. However, it is lower than the projections earlier this year when the thought process came through about the year 6 extensions. And so with that, I'm not going to focus too much on the details here, but the idea of a projection is our next slide. So Maya, can you move us forward one? All right, again, a busy slide, so we'll spend a little bit of time here, but I do want to call out Julie was able to help develop this and track, and appreciate her work on this. The green bar in the middle is kind of the average 75% maintenance funding level across years after the administrative grant has been been taken out. So that's kind of the 75%, 25% split average line that occurs over all years. The maintenance projects have been, I apologize for the phone in the background. The maintenance projects have been going, trending pretty well. The differences that you really see in 2021, so the maintenance projects had a dip there, in large part because Maine chose to wait a year to submit another proposal, and the new projects bumped up because last year PRFC was a larger and newer proposal that came through, and both of those moved to maintenance in the 2022 proposals that have been submitted. So the kind of coincidence of the yellow and the blue bar bridging the green line is simply just an awareness of where the 75-25 point is when we include the extra year for those three projects that chose to submit. And so that's a bit of how things have tracked historically for maintenance and new proposals. On the right side of the screen, you can see there's two kind of projection bars, and those relate to kind of an Excel forecast of historical maintenance funds in the kind of greater slope reddish brown bar. And then the gray bar is the manual, where the expectations written up at the top of which particular projects are expected to end or meet a step down time period. And the nice news there is that the mathematical projection as well as the manual projection are pretty darn close in terms of what's going to happen in the future for maintenance proposals. There, of course, is no future projection on new proposals, as that wouldn't be very valid. We don't know those things at this time. The next slide is for the administrative proposal, but oops, sorry, Maya, I misspoke. Can you go back one, please? Thank you. And just at this point, I want to ask if the council has any questions or thoughts about where the maintenance and new project proposals are, or questions at this point in the presentation. And I'm looking for hands. So far, I am not seeing any.
Jeff, this is Bob Veal. I guess I'm an organizer, so I can't raise my hand. But can
Please go ahead.
Or I guess I should be asking John. But Jeff, on your previous slide with all the new projects, maintenance projects, and admin grant, it just to be, I guess, the simplest possible, where normal ACCSP funding is around 3.4 million. When you add up everything that's been proposed for 2022, we're at 3.6 and change. So we're $225 or $250,000 short. So when we get to the October meeting, that's when we're going to need to sort out that difference between, where basically what's not funded, or how do we make up that 225 or 250,000? Is that an accurate summary of where we are?
That is correct. I do see Richard Cody's hand up, and this information is really for your information. Final proposals aren't due until August 14th, so there may be a few pencil sharpening activities occurring, including the admin grant. The other thing is there's potential for at least one of the projects has asked for funding elsewhere. So yes, there's about a $250K difference to think about, but at this point, the proposals still need to be ranked in September and brought back to the coordinating council for evaluation in October. So there's not a need for action right now. with that, Mr. Chair, Richard Cody has his hand up, so I would call on him if you have no objection.
I do not. You go ahead and call on hands since you can see them.
Jeff, I just had one question. There were three maintenance projects that choose to exercise the extension. How many overall projects were there that didn't? Or were there any? I thought there were two.
Julie, can you help me out? Yes, thank you. I thought it was 3, but I was just checking. There were 3 other projects that chose not to submit for the extension.
All right, thank you.
I am not seeing other hands, so at this point, let's step forward to the admin proposal. So Maya, move 1 slide forward, please. Excellent. Again, this is a new part of the process to include this information. While it's available through the operations committee, and I did want to at least provide some transparency to you about what we're looking at and projecting, and that this will again come back in October. So the big point here is instead of presenting it as we did last year, kind of an option 1 with a software person and a different option, the leadership team has discussed and left this as presenting as one proposal. I will identify that 2021 is there as a comparison point, but it does look like it's about a $250,000 increase from what was actually funded last year. I did want to point out that there was a lower meeting cost for the 2021 because of the pandemic. There was also a choice in trying to find some funds to delay the hiring of the data team lead, and so that has been accomplished, provided some cost savings, but the 2021 only included half of the year for that. And the other choice was in the carryover funds from previously, all of the help desk was chosen to move to the carryover funds. And so for the coming year, yes, we included the software staff member as well, and under contracts in other, we include about $90,000 for application development and about $75,000 for the help desk support. And we recognize that we're learning still about how much the help desk costs on a monthly basis. At the moment, last year's funding stream is working out to cover what we think we need to by the end of February. And if there's need to seek external support for the help desk next year, we will continue on those efforts. But I recognize the concern of the council and the balance between the admin grant and funds available to projects and some of those, what are the ACCSP priorities and workload balances, and what is the best coast-wide use of the ACCSP funding and approach. So those things are all on the table. I'm working with John and the leadership team about some perspectives of where we're headed with those types of things, and we'll have more information. We have more meetings scheduled for later in August and September, but we'll have more information for you at your October meeting. Just for a little more clarity on what the admin proposal includes, Maya, next slide, please, for the justification for a future software staff member. Right now we have kind of 2.5 positions in software. And we're doing great on the current capabilities list. That is, database storage, record processing, the online. Apex just happens to be the name of what that is, what that software is. But that's an in-house Oracle tool. And the ACCSP end of the API, the application programming interface, but the way that mobile apps and other folks interact with the database from a submit data and get validations and things back. The growth areas in the middle are really about mobile app development, maintenance, and deployment, and being able to test the mobile apps across environments and features. And that is kind of a catch-all, and I don't want to get too geeky on you guys, but when you deploy an application to mobile platforms, you've got differences between the Windows, the Android, and the iOS applications, which require additional testing. Also, with e-trips and movement towards one-stop reporting and the way that it's working right now, there's a lot of great flexibility with a partner switchboard of turning questions or options or things on and off. The difficulty with that is it depends on your login, and if a person logs in that has one permit, it's really straightforward to test. If they log in with 2, 3, or more permits associated with their account, it just becomes a little bit more difficult to test. So that's why there's a need to kind of test those things, and that is really a trade-off point with your agency staff in how much ACCSP can test and how much we rely on you as partner staff to test. So that is an important point that has to do with your staff workload balancing. And these growth areas in the software team member would decrease in the long term, but not eliminate the need for contract support. So, right now, when there is a bump in work activity that is short term and we have reliance on their knowledge and development expertise, I think that contract support will still be necessary. However, making smaller changes or having the capability to not be one deep and having some staff resources there to onboard that part is an important long-term vision. And so that is a bit of what we're looking at on the staff justification points. And again, I think this is a good point to pause and ask for questions. The next agenda item, Julie's going to cover the accountability subgroup update. But while we're here, I think this is a good point to see if anyone has desire to raise any questions. And at the moment, I'm not seeing any hands up.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I think it is good to pause here. And as Bob mentioned, looking down the road, there's a potential funding squeeze we might have to deal with depending on how projects play out in October. So we wanted to highlight the admin grant and a few of the points Jeff raised about 2021 versus 2022 are pretty relevant. 2021 was a special year and there were a number of adjustments made within the initial admin grant to support as many projects as possible. And one of those was including pushing off the software staff. So wanted to highlight the various things that have changed within that. Recognizing the difference in the bottom line could cause some attention.
Thank you, John. We have a hand up from John Clark. So, Mr. Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Good explanation of the need to increase the administrative budget. Just curious, it's about an 11% increase in the administrative budget. Do you know what the Bob? I know we were over this with with Noah on Monday, but how much is the federal line increasing for ACCSP?
I don't recall, John. Let me go back and look, but I think it's staying relatively stable from, you know, because it's complicated, which is not a great answer, but part of ACCSP's funding is a set amount of the Atlantic Coastal Act, and the other part is the fin line. And the fin line, I think, is increasing a little bit, but I don't know how much of that line, the fin budget increase, will directly translate to money that goes to the individual programs at the three interstate commissions. So it's kind of a complicated answer. The line seems to be going up, but I don't know how much that will translate into ACCSP budget increasing. Hopefully some. Hopefully some.
So this is sort of the term, what was the one that Paul Doremus used, funding erosion, where you're level funded, but because of inflation, the funding is actually decreasing?
Yep, the value of every dollar keeps going down, unfortunately.
And this is Jeff. I absolutely appreciate those points, and that the leadership team, kind of old new name for the ACCSP Executive Committee, has asked for some of those trade-off questions about what does core ACCSP staff bring to the entire coast-wide benefit versus and workload for partner staff, as well as the ability for project funding to go out. And so you know, those are the discussions that are going on with the leadership team, and providing some really healthy feedback between them and myself about what are the priorities moving forward. I'm not seeing other hands. So
Okay, if no other hands, yeah, I think we can move on.
Yep. Mr. Chair, if you wanted to hand it over to Julie, we can go to the next slide and get the update on the accountability subgroup.
All right, take it away, Julie.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Maya, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, so the accountability subgroup, we've reported to you before. And last time we reported, we had defined accountability, and we had gotten through inventorying the current practices and procedures that were happening. Maya, if you could click one more time. Thanks. What we've been able to work on in the last year is to review that original survey that we did and figure out how we needed to address, what we needed to do to address items 3 and 4, which is defining the gaps between what's being provided and what's needed for science and management. And then also evaluate all those current practices and procedures and what works and what works for someone that someone else may not be aware of. And so we've actually been able to complete 3 and 4, and we are currently in the process of working on the documentation and developing best practices and standards. Our hope is to have at least a preliminary draft report ready for this group by their October meeting. Just to give you an idea of what we've been working on in the last year, Maya, if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. The original survey that we did had 19 respondents. It went to all of the agencies that are partners of ACCSP. And we asked fairly broad questions about what practices were used at the agency, such as onboard observers, dockside monitors and samplers, do not fish reports, interagency report comparisons, things like, does your agency conduct audits? And so this kind of gave us an idea of what tools and processes that were being used by everyone. But we realized that we needed to get down into a deeper level to really address items 3 and 4 in our objectives. And so our second survey, Maya, if you can go ahead for me. Thank you. In this one, we followed up with our data managers. And so we essentially went back out to the ACCSP partners and we expanded the number of people that we sent this one to. We got 34 respondents. As you can see from the rainbow pie chart, there's really great representation both at the state and federal level, and the commission and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and you know, there's really a lot of representation in the respondents here, and so we were very pleased with the broad breadth of response, and thankful to everyone who took the time to answer these questions. The questions in this survey was really for the data managers, asking them, when you're reconciling the data, what do you see? And we looked at things like lack of metadata and caveats. We also asked questions that were geared toward, you know, do you have to do things manually? Why do you have to do them manually? What causes delays? Where do you feel like you have the resources to do the things that you want to do? And where do you feel like things may or may not get done because of a lack of resources? And then finally, in the last slide, and Maya, if you can advance, thank you. We reached out to our data consumers, and again, we broadened the user group here because it includes a lot of the agencies that we've talked to, but it also included other people in those agencies, and we also broadened our group to include academic institutions. We also included the regional councils in this as well. And so you can see, again, we have great representation, and we greatly appreciate everyone that responded to this. We got 47 responses to this one. Very similar to what we did with the data managers, we asked our data consumers about their experiences when they're working with the data. And so this was, you know, do you feel the fields are clearly defined? How accessible is the data for you? Is the availability of data happening in a time that works for you? Do you see inconsistencies between data sources? So these are the kinds of things that we've asked people, and now we're basically going through all of this information and attempting to put it together into a report and figure out what everyone's experiencing and where's the delta between what we want to do as managers, what the data consumers need, and what's currently being produced, and how we can potentially address those gaps. And that's my last slide. And so Mr. Chair, Richard Cody has his hand up.
Okay, sure. And say, Julie, I just want to say, you know, I really appreciate the work of this group and what you've done working with them as well. And, you know, and thanks to those who took the time to respond to the survey. This type of two-way feedback seems like it's going to be really helpful and help us keep the program moving forward. And it's great to see that broad participation, as you mentioned. And so with that, I'll go over to Richard for a question.
Yeah, Julie, can you explain who would be included in other on the pie chart?
I'd actually have to check on the other, and I can get back to you on that one. But I believe that might have been, we did try to reach out to some of the folks that are I'm trying to think about the people there. We put this out there to a really broad group. I think there was a couple hundred people that we actually asked. And I believe that we got, off the top of my head, that group includes, there was a journalist that responded to this. There was someone who is in charge of their fishing cooperative that responded to this. So essentially anyone who wasn't part of an agency. There were a couple of folks that were retired that still in some way participate in council activities and still use the data. So those are the folks that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
And I also see Lynn Begley's hand up.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Question, Julie, you probably said this and I probably just blanked and missed it. Is the list of items, like lack of clearly defined fields, timing of availability, those are the responses that you got from people, or those are particular things you were looking for in the survey?
Those were particular things that we asked in the survey. We did allow for sort of free-form additional comments at the end of the survey, but we tried to create it in such a way where there was categories that we created, and we were asked people to rank them on one of those sliders. That way we would have quantifiable data for the majority of everything, and then other comments that we could dig through to hopefully provide extra clarification.
Okay, and so my question is about inconsistencies between sources. I'm just wondering, were you thinking about inconsistencies between NOAA, like GARFO and ACCSP numbers, and was there any question, because what I'm trying to get at is this issue of confidentiality, and I think that confidentiality is handled differently, by different folks. I guess I'm just wondering what that inconsistency between sources was trying to get to. Thanks.
Yep. There are a couple of components with that. One is the idea of different folks showing data publicly, especially differently. Some of that at the federal level has been resolved because ACCSP did work with the federal folks to have our databases align, which was a huge improvement for, I think, everyone. But we were also looking at it from the perspective of, at the confidential level, if someone goes in and gets data maybe from ACCSP and then up at GARFO gets data from the AA tables, where those have had value added, which means there's been some manipulation, which means you might see an inconsistency. The other thing was merely the idea that, if you ask one person and then you ask another person, if you're not clear about exactly what you want, your data could get queried differently. Just the code that's written is different. And so that kind of thing can also create inconsistencies that are inadvertent because you've asked two people the same question without being uber specific.
Thanks. And if I could just follow up quickly to say that I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing here. Like the chairman said, this is, I think, going to be in the long run extremely helpful for the rigor of our data in these programs. So thanks.
Absolutely. Mr. Chair, I don't see any more hands.
Okay, thank you. If no others, we can move on. Let's see what was next. Yep. So there'll be Jeff on the Atlantic Recreational Implementation Plan and priorities.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maya, one more slide, please. Thank you so much. You as a group discussed this during your last meeting, and just kind of more a quick update standpoint and opportunity to add suggestions down there at the bottom. But about every 5 years, MREP asked the regional implementation teams, ACCSP being one of them, to update the priorities and fill out that document. And so as we do that, historical priorities are left on there is what we're expecting. The ideas of improving precision and comprehensive for-hire data collection and monitoring are where we've focused our efforts, and I say our in the collective, because MREP has made significant progress in both the data standards as well as the funding for APIS to address PSE. And ACCSP has been working on kind of the for-hire data collection and monitoring piece pretty aggressively. But as the RecTech committee and staff will flesh out this document a bit more, it includes both the sections on background, intended direction, potential costs, et cetera. And these implementation plan priorities are used by MREP to set their longer term funding and responsiveness to coastwide needs. And so the request is for all ACCSP, partners, agencies, including the councils, to really weigh in so that items that are important and coming up are included in the document to the best extent possible. So during the May meeting and when Operations Committee discussed about it, adding in citizen science, adding in the in-season monitoring, the National Academy of Science report was released just maybe 2 weeks ago. I want to say the week of the 19th of July, and MREP has a plan to respond to that externally. And of course, we heard some of Janet Coit's comments at the beginning of this week about that being a priority for them as well. So I've heard Dee Lupton happen to speak up during the main meeting is having that in-season rec monitoring as an important item to address as well. And then, of course, the last one is kind of regional coordination for consistent use of MREP data. This came up from the Rec Tech Committee, was very briefly discussed at meetings since then. And if these are items that the council would like us to fill in on the next iteration of the implementation plan, I think we are all set to flesh that out and bring it back to the council when the document has been drafted, because you will have approval of that before it is finalized. But again, an opportunity to have a little discussion. We do have another 15 minutes here, or provide the bullet of an important item that you'd like us to add to the list and look into. I see a hand up from Kathy Knowlton. So Kathy, please go ahead.
Good morning. I am super excited with these additional suggestions, both from the point of view of such progress that has already been made since the 2017 list was originally put together and has been continually chipped away at. Particularly, I agree with you with the increase in sample size that came through MREP. So for these additional suggestions, I think I heard you say that the meeting was just in like this spring, early summer. So when you got on that bullet point that the additional suggestions were for the years 22 through 26, it's going to sound like I'm asking a really weird specific question. When it says 2022, does that mean for inclusion as priorities in FY22 proposals? And to make that a little bit more specific, so in the funding proposal process, in addition to the two matrices, the July 2017 funding prioritization for the Rec Tech Committee is a part of the ranking process. And obviously those bullet points 1 through 6, since that was posted July, didn't have the benefit of these additional suggestions. So do these additional suggestions have a part in the ranking process for FY22 proposals?
Kathy, thanks for the question. Right now, they do not. And so the funding decision document and the RFP that went out in June, when it comes to ranking of criteria and proposals that have already been submitted, they're certainly good projects, but I don't believe they're part of the documented ranking that will occur by ops and advisors in this September. The 22
those are calendar, basically, that are listed in that slide.
Yeah, the 2022 to 26 is the timeline of the Atlantic Recreational Implementation Plan. So about every 5 years at a maximum, or if there's been a major shift in priorities, the regional plans should be updated. MREP's provided guidance nationally on that. and we're kind of due, and the Gulf of Mexico Gulf Commission is also in the process of updating theirs this year. So that document I would expect to be referenced in the ACCSP RFP next May, going forward. But for proposals already submitted, no, these things are not part of the process.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification.
I do not see other hands. Oh, Richard Cody has his hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the timeline there, the fact that MRIP develops a 5-year or so strategic plan, and the next one's coming up for development right now, and we expect to implement it sometime in 2023. So having the different regional implementation plan priorities identified will help us too in terms of planning strategically for over the next few years. So I don't know if that helps Kathy lend some context to the dates that are provided there.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah.
And for the council, the MRIP Executive Steering Committee, which Bob is on, has asked me to participate in their strategic planning process in that group. So that will be one thing that I'm participating in over the next 6 months or so. Not seeing any more hands at the moment. I do want to touch on one more slide. Maya, can you move forward one? The MRIP survey and data standards, this slide was presented to you back in May, and I simply wanted to call out during the coordinating council meeting that Richard will be presenting it during the policy board at the next meeting, I believe starting at 12:15. Both the 2020 estimate development as well as the MREP survey and data standards presentation. So I invite all of the coordinating council members to stick around for that presentation coming up. And as I said, that there will be opportunities for not just the presentation, but discussion of that at the policy board meeting in the wider audience. So Maya, you can move one slide forward, and I will turn it back to our chair. We have finished the presentation for today.
All right, thank you, Jeff. And I appreciate the ongoing updates of MRIP. Always an important topic, and recreational fisheries grow more and more important every day to deal with them and get good data. And you guys are doing a good job there. And I like to see continual evolution of the priorities and what we recognize as being important. So appreciate the efforts there, and just see if are there any other questions for any other topics here or other business to bring up before we adjourn. So Jeff, no hands?
We had no hands, but Kathy got hers up in time. So Kathy.
Sorry, I thought that was a legacy hand. Sorry to let you down.
Not letting us down. Thank you all for your attention and participation today. John, back to you.
All right, yeah, thank you. A legacy hand indeed. All right, so I think we stand adjourned and yield back 8 minutes to the commission. Well done, everybody. Thank you.